All right, so let's keep it going. Next part, I lost count of how many parts, so we'll see after I'm done. For each function, state the amplitude period if there is a reflection. Nope, don't need to worry about reflection. Remember, reflection is if I have a negative right here, that flips my graph over because the graph of sine looks like that with this being the midline. And if I have a graph that looks like this, that would be the reflection of sine. Instead of starting high and going low, it would start low and go high. So we don't care about that, or at the very least, we're not like calling that out. So you don't need to worry about that. So let's look at our stuff here, and I want to color this not red. So let's go with purple. Okay, so we want to find the amplitude, the period, the phase shift, and vertical shift. Write none or not applicable for transformations that don't exist. Do not write zero. Follow instructions. Make sure you read. If you give me zero, might have to give you some points off. So remember, none is or not applicable. That's what that means. So let's look. So let's skip the period and go to amplitude, and then we'll think about, because remember, the period isn't there. You have to take the frequency and divide it into 2 pi. So let's look at this. What's my amplitude? Well, amplitude is first. Here it is right here. Amplitude is first. But amplitude is also the absolute value it is. So in this case, amplitude is 2, right? Not Z, 2. Let's just go through all these. So what's the amplitude for this one? Well, in this case, the amplitude is 4. And then what's the amplitude here? There's no number there, and we know mathematicians are lazy. Why? Because no number when you're multiplying means it's a 1. That's actually a negative 1, but we take the absolute value. So negative 1, that's positive 1. Okay? So that's my amplitude. Now let's think of the frequency. Frequency, according to this, would go right here, and right here. So it looks like the frequency for all three of my things is 1. See? Now, remember when we had that problem that had something that looked like this? Because my frequency was kind of inside the parentheses. Because this is how we've been doing stuff so far. The frequency will be on the outside. That's going to be multiplied by the stuff on the inside. Well, on that problem that we did the other day in bell work, we distributed that before we started working on it. Well, I distributed it. So when I wrote the problem, it looked like this instead of like that. Okay, so I had to pull out the 5 so we could get our frequency. So we don't need to worry about this though. So let's just look at what we got. So all of my x's are by themselves, right? So the number that is times your x, that's your frequency. Well, nothing's being times it, so my frequency is 1. So if my frequency is 1, remember my period is 2 pi over b, or frequency, the freak, right? So if my frequency is 1, then that's going to be 2 pi over 1. So every one of these periods is 2 pi. All right. So now let's go to phase shift and vertical shift. Right here, there's nothing on the outside. Remember what I was telling you, that the way this works, that this whole thing here is pretty much all these things are being put together. They're like one thing. So I've got sine, which is a function. So you can think of a function like a toaster. So I've got this toaster, and then what I'm putting in the toaster is what's in parentheses here, all of this stuff. But then there may be a number in front. So then it's like I'm putting butter on the toast. So this number tells me what I'm doing to the bread, and then I put the bread in the function, and then after all of that, then I multiply my answer that I get from there finally by my amplitude. So all of that is just one piece, right? All of that. But then here, the vertical shift at the very end, that is outside of that. That's that lazy cousin that says he's gonna help you, do your chores, gonna help you wash dishes and help you clean the basement, but he don't come around till like 6 hours later, and then you already done. So all the work was done over here, and then we got that little blah zitty blah right there. So my phase shift is going to be outside these parentheses. That's what that long little cousin story, man. And maybe I'm still mad at my cousin for saying he's going to help me and he didn't. Anyway, so nothing there means that there's no vertical shift. So I'm going to say none for here. Nothing there means there's no vertical shift. So I'm going to say none there. This one does have a vertical shift. So let's save that one for last. So now I'm going to look at phase shift. So remember how we got this. Phase shift is in this format. So my phase shift is in the format of x minus what my phase shift is. Okay? So because that's the way it is, I'm going to write down the opposite of what I see because my phase shift is c. So right here, I've got x minus pi. So that means my phase shift is positive pi or pi. Right here, I've got x minus 3 pi over 2. So that's x minus, so my phase shift is going to be 3 pi over 2. Now let's look at big dog right here, which got all this stuff. Okay, so we already talked about the amplitude. That was positive 1, even though that was negative. Then we talked about the frequency, which is not there. So because it's being multiplied, that's 1. And then that led to the period being 2 pi. Because if your frequency is 1, your period is 2 pi. So now let's look at the phase shift. This is x plus pi over 2. Remember, it should be minus phase shift. So that means that I got x minus a negative pi over 2. Because when you subtract the negative, it's the same as adding a positive, right? So now it's in my form like my sheet. So x minus c, x minus negative pi over 2. So my phase shift is negative pi over 2. So then finally, let's get to that vertical shift. So outside of all of this, I've got plus 1. So after all the work is done, my punk cousin want to come around talk about here, Ferg, I'm here. Nope. So that means my vertical shift is just 1 or positive 1. So that's all of that. So now let's finish this review up by looking at sketches of. Oh, shoot, we got two things. So let's jump to these two things and do these real quick, and then we'll get to the other thing. Okay. So change radians to degrees. Well, we already did this, but I want you to think about negative values. Okay, because it's possible. So changing radians to degrees, you take your radians, whatever they are, and multiply them times 180 over pi. So let's do this one real quick. You know what? 3 pi over 4 is on our chart. It's not negative, but I'm going to show you what we do with that. So if I go to my chart real quick, I believe my chart is right there. If I go to 3 pi over 4, right? 3 pi over 4 is 135 degrees. But this is negative. So all I do is make that a negative 135 degrees. And that's all that we do. That's nope, that's blue, I think. I think we use blue for that. So that's negative 135. Now 39 pi over 9, that's bigger than 360 degrees. So that's not going to fit on our chart. So we need to do it the old-fashioned way. I need to take negative 39 pi over 9 and multiply that times 180 over pi. So now I got some stuff to cross cancel. So let's do that. So from jump, the pi's go away because my degrees don't have any pi. And if it would please the court, I'm just going to put the negative there. Now I'm going to ignore the negative. Okay, so we're not going to worry about the negative. So I look kitty corner, I've got 9 and I've got 180. Well, 180 is 18 times 10. So 18 times 10, I know 9 can go in there. So we're going to divide this by 9, and so that's going to make 1. And then I'm going to divide this by 9, and that's going to make 20. So now I've got 39 times 20. Well, that's not so bad, because if it's times 20, all I got to do is multiply this by 2 and put a 0 on the end. because 20, 39 times 20. Let's just put the 0 and then multiply by 2. So 39 times 2 is what, 78? So that's going to be 780, sorry, 780 for my degrees. Okay, so now let's hurry up so we can get to this drawing. So this one is more than 360. So let's do the one that's less than 360 first. So I'm going to just put the negative here because I know it's going to be negative. And for changing degrees to radians, I've got degrees times pi over 180. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to take, if I look at my chart, 225 is 5 pi over 4 according to my chart. We've been doing it enough back and forth that I think I could just write that, right? Now we could do it the long way, you know. We could say 225 pi over 180, and then we can start reducing. Well, I got a 5 on the end here and a 0 on the end here, so I would divide by 5 to start. And if I could find something else, so I divide by 5, top and bottom. So 5 goes in to 180. Let's see, that goes in there 3, so that's 36. And then 5 goes into 22 4 times, right? And then with 2 left over, 5 goes into 25 5 times. And then I will reduce that by dividing by 9. 45 divided by 9 is 5 on the top. 36 divided by 9 is 4 on the bottom. Boom, I'm done. So now let's get 540 done, and then we get to our sketches. So I got 540, let's just say over 1, times pi over 180, right? So what is that? Let's see, I got some room, so let's do it over here because I space it out a little bit more. Times pi over 180. So that's 540 pi over 180. Not really any cross canceling to do there. So let's think about what we got. Well, it ends in 0, so that means we can divide by 2, right? It's divisible by 2. And then if I do the digit trick, let's see if it can be divided by 3. 5 plus 4 plus 0, that's 9. 1 plus 8 plus 0, that's 9. So it can be divided by 3. Because it can be divided by 2 and 3, that means it can be divided by 6. They both end in 0, so that means we could be divided by 5. They both end in 0, so that also means we could be divided by 10. And then the 3 trick also works for 9. 5 plus 4 plus 0 is 9. 1 plus 8 plus 0 is 9. So it could be divided by 9. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of cheat. And I'm going to say if it can be divided by 10 and line, let's try dividing it by 90 and see if it'll work. So let's go 90 and let's go 90. So what would that mean? Because 90 is just 9 times 10, right? 9 times 10. So if that's too difficult to see, let's divide it by 10 first. 10 just cancels off the zeros. So now I got 54 pi over 18. So now I can divide by 9, right? 9 goes into 18 2 times. Okay? And then 9 goes into 54, what? 6 times? So that's 6 pi over 2. Wait a minute, 6 pi over 2? If I ignore the pi, that's an easy division problem. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So my answer is negative. Well, let's do it in red because we don't want to be inconsistent. So my answer is negative 3 pi. Remember, 360 degrees is 2 pi. So saying it's 3 pi means it's more than 360 degrees. So yep, that works. Got those out the way. So let's get to this sketching finally. Oh my gosh. Okay, so sketch the graph. Y equals 3 cosine of x. So let's think about what this equation tells us. The first number, that's my A, so it tells us amplitude. So my amplitude is 3. Does it tell us what the frequency is? The frequency is 1. Okay. Is there a phase shift? Nope, there's no phase shift. Nope. And then is there a vertical shift? Nope. And then just to be thorough, so then what does that mean for the period? Well, it's 2 pi over 1, so it's 2 pi. So I need to draw a graph with all these things happening. So let's do that. Let's go with, let's say brown. Okay. So it's cosine. Remember, cosine starts high, hits the midline, goes to the very lowest point, and it goes back to the midline, and then ends high. So my amplitude is 3. So because I didn't have any shift up or down, my midline is going to be the x-axis. So it's right here. So then my amplitude is 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm starting right here, and I should end right there. My period is 2 pi. My frequency is 1. There's 2 pi, so I should end right here. So remember that the standard graphs go 0, then pi over 2, then pi, then 3 pi over 2, then finally 2 pi. That hits those 5 marks. So let's hit those marks. So I got 0, then I've got 2 pi right there, then I've got pi right here, and then I've got 3 pi over 2. Well, that's not where that's supposed to go, but we know we need to go through there, so let's just keep that in mind. So I'm starting at 3, right? And my low point is going to be -3. So I need to hit one graph. So I'm going to start there, hit that, and I should go all the way down to -3 right here, right? So now I need to go back up until I get to 3 pi over 2. And then finally, I end at 2 pi. So this will be 3 cosine of x. 3 cosine of x. So now let's look at the next one. Okay. So amplitude, what do we got? Amplitude, there's no number. So no number, because mathematicians are lazy, is 1. All right. Now we need to think of the frequency. So what's the frequency? The frequency is 2. So now let's skip, because now we got a frequency. Let's skip and say what the period is this time. Oops, spelled it wrong. You know what? Since I'm erasing it, let's just stay consistent and let's go phase shift next. So what's the phase shift? It needs to be the value that's being added or subtracted to x, and then multiplied by what the frequency's number is. Well, because there's just 2x here, that means 2 got multiplied, the frequency got multiplied by x, and no other number. So that means there is no phase shift. But vertical shift, vertical shift. So the vertical is 1, and we're talking about sine. So let's see if we can get that going. Now let's go back and talk about period real quick. So the period is 2 pi over my frequency, which is 2. Well, 2 pi over 2, the 2's cancel off, and so my period is pi. So what does that tell me? That tells me that I have one graph that fits within pi, right? So let's think about it. So what's the amplitude? It's 1. So my graph is no higher than this. Let's get a darker color so you can see it. Okay, so that's about as high as my graph's going to go. That's about as low as my graph's going to go. Oh, wait. No, it's not, because I have a vertical shift. This is where my graph starts, but my graph is telling me that it's going to shift upward. So everything is going to shift upward. So let's say that instead, let's mark our high point and low point with red. So my high point is going to go up, and my low point is going to go up. So it's going to start My high point is going to be 2, and my low point is going to be 0. All right. So let's keep that in mind. So then that means that my midline was at 0. Now my midline is going to go up to 1. So this is my midline. So that's where my sine graph is going to start. Okay. So this is my new midline right here. All right. So now let's change colors. Now we got my stuff all set. Let's say green. Okay. So my graph is going to start here. Now the next thing is I need to fit one solid graph in pi. So if I look between 0 and pi, which is right here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 marks. Well, haven't I been saying that the regular graph has 5 marks starting with 0? So then I'm not even going to focus on what they are. I'm just going to know that all the steps that I need to make pi, they're going to hit each one of these marks. Okay. So I know that the sine graph starts at the midline and it goes up, hits the high point, goes back to the midline, then it goes to the lowest point, and then it ends at the midline. So those are my 5 points that I need to have. So this is my first point because it's starting at the y-axis. So then I'm going to go to my high point. So my high point is my first hash mark, so it's going to go there. And then I go back to the midline for my next point. So I want that to be kind of an arc, right? Okay, so then my next point is I'm going down to the lowest point. The lowest point is 0 in this case. So there we go. And then finally, right here, I'm going to have my graph end at pi. So, but wait a minute. My frequency says I should have 2 graphs but for 2 pi. So in this case, I'd want you to continue, right? I guess I should put something in the instructions, or I should have put something in the instructions that says maybe you just focus on the positive side if there isn't a phase shift. So let's just focus on the positive side. Maybe that, or maybe I'll give you extra credit for going further than the boundary. So if you finish the graph on going to the left, maybe we'll give you extra credit. So that would be just like this is starting a sine. I go up 1, I go to midline, I go down 1, and I go back to the midline. So got curves going here. So this graph right here, if I get rid of those reds, no. So that right there is my graph for sine of 2x plus 1 because it moved up, right? So now let's just go backwards. Well, let's think about it backwards. So if this is where I'm starting and I'm going backwards, first I'm going to hit the low point, then I'm going to hit back at the middle, then I'm going to hit the high point, then I'm going to hit the middle again. So and then I'm going to do it again. Low point, middle, high, middle. So and that is not cute at all. But that would be my y equals whatever. And just to continue, let's come back up here. Let's continue this one. So that's where cosine is. If I'm going backwards, this one has got, it skips a mark. So then this one would be where I touch, and then this one would be where I hit the low point, and then this one would be where I go back up, and then this one would be where I finally end. So that would be my graph for y equals 3 cosine of x. Like I said, if you continue it and into the negative and the positive, I might give you extra credit. So I'm thinking about it. So now let's finish this son of a gun. So what is my amplitude for this cosine graph? So my amplitude is 2. So it's going to be too high. Next, my frequency. My frequency is 2. Frequency is 2. And then what's my phase? What's my phase shift? My phase shift ain't nothing there. So it's not applicable. But guess what? I still got that vertical to talk about. And my vertical in this case is That dash is going to be deceiving, so I'm just going to put in parentheses, is -1. So then what's my period? Well, my period goes to the same thing that we just did, right? My period is 2 pi over the frequency, which is 2. The 2's cancel off, and I've got a period of pi. So I know that I have one complete graph that's within pi. So now let's get some stuff going. We're looking at cosine. So it starts high, hits the midline, and then goes low, and then goes back to the midline and ends high, right? That's what I got. So let's start. It says the amplitude is 2. So that would mean I'd be right here and right here. So I'd be between there. But there's a vertical shift and it's -1. So that means my graph's going to go down 1 unit. So that means that my graph is going to start right here and it's going to end right there. Or not start right here, but I mean, as far as the high point is going to be that one, and the low point is going to be that one. So I'll erase those so there's no confusion. We're still doing cosine, right? So then that means my midline moved too. So my midline was going to be at 0. Now it's going to be at -1. So this is my new midline right there. So let's hurry up and draw this puppy. So if I'm talking about frequency of 2, usually my stuff would go 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi. Well, I got to scrunch all of it within pi. So that means I'm going to go here, start at 0, go here, then I'm going to go here, then I'm going to go back here, then I'm going to go there. So let's just focus on that. So I'm starting up here. So my first stop is right here, right? And then my midline is right there. So cosine, no, wait a minute. No, that's not right. Sorry. I just said the midline was there and I drew the wrong spot. So let's get that off of there. Okay. Sorry. So the midline is right here. So it's going to go right here. So it's going to go zoop. And now I'm going to go to the very bottom, that's my low point. And then I'm going to shoot back up to my midline. That's right here. And then I'm going to finally end at my high point, which is right there. So, and now I need to do the whole process again. So this is my high point. I'm going to hit at the midline. See, don't hit it right here because the midline's right there. I need you to see that, okay? So the midline's right here. Don't make the same mistake I started to make just a second ago. And then finally the very bottom's right there. And then we're going to head back up to the midline. And then we're going to end high. So we're going to go zoop. And that's that. Now let's go backwards to see what's going on negatively. So if I'm looking backwards, I'm starting at the high point. I'm going to hit the midline, then I'm going to hit the low point. So high point, I'm going to hit the midline, and let's draw it over here. Midline's right there. Right? Okay. So let's finish this up. So high, I'm going to hit the midline. I'm going to hit the very bottom. I went too far. Sorry. So I'm going to hit the midline. I'm going to go to the very bottom. Right? I'm going to go back to the midline, and then I'm going to end on the high point. So, and I'm going to do the same process again. I'm going to hit the midline. I'm going to go to the very bottom. I'm going to go back to the midline, and then I'm going to end high right there. And that's it. So that's all of what we got for the review. Finished with that puppy, and now we're stopping. Good luck.